Situation in Venezuela was bad yesterday and it's much worse today because Juan Guaido, the US-backed opposition leader in Venezuela, has begun what is being called in some quarters a military uprising. In others, there's a shorter term for it. But in any event, it's against Nicolas Maduro and it has been developing throughout the day. As of this point, it is difficult to say exactly what percentage or which blocks of the military are supporting one side or the other, but there has been violence already. So leading up to this, for weeks, Guaido's supporters have held protests aimed in part at convincing the nation's military, which has thus far remained mostly loyal to Maduro, to break with the dictator and support Guaido. At dawn today, he released a video calling on the entire country, so this is huge masses of the people, but also the military, to switch over and have overthrow him. Now, Maduro responded shortly after that video by saying he and his supporters have, quote, nerves of steel, and that he wants the, quote, maximum mobilization of the people to assure a victory for peace. Since then, there have been video clips that have been coming out showing both protests but also clashes between different groups. Although there are some people who will claim that they are enough experts of the domestic situation in Venezuela to easily tell the sides apart and understand exactly what's going on. I will not pretend to do that, but there is at least the beginnings of violence with armored vehicles being driven into crowds of people, shots being fired. I have not seen any word yet specifically of casualties, but it is not difficult to imagine that happening. It's also not difficult to imagine that that sort of result could be the strategy of at least one side.
The 52 people apparently, last we heard as we were going on air, have been taken to the hospital, some because of rubber bullets, but no report of anyone dying yet. So John was referring to what the American propaganda outlets, not just the United States government, but a lot of the mainstream media, in bowing their heads to the United States government propaganda, have started calling an uprising. No. An uprising is something we're doing here in America, where the citizens are sick of the current political system, and whether it's fighting for health care or the environment or getting money out of politics, we're doing an uprising. That is a political event. This is not an uprising, this is an obvious coup. See, when you ask for the military to switch sides and turn their guns on their colleagues and compatriots, that would be the definition of a coup. When you say, hey, not only are we going to do protests in the streets from citizens, but I've got people lined up at the border, and he does, former members of the Venezuelan military are now at the border with Colombia saying they're ready to be activated to come in. And Guaido has asked that you come armed. What part of this is complicated? So
gun enthusiasm, that's all that is.
Yeah, I'm sure. So the only thin reed they have to justify not calling it a coup, and currently the United States government is pressuring and bullying. It actually reminds me of what Erdogan does in Turkey, where if the media, any branch of the media disagrees with him, he calls them and harasses them and bullies them. And that's what John Bolton, Pompeo, and the US government is doing now, and it's working brilliantly.
Would you like to see some examples?
Yes.
They have put out at least a little bit of communication. So Secretary Pompeo says today interim President Juan Guaido announced start of Operación Libertad. The US government fully supports the Venezuelan people in their quest for freedom and democracy. Democracy cannot be defeated, but we are going to try in 2020. Then
hold on, let me explain. So that's the ghost of thin reed. They say no, technically it's not a coup because Guaido, we think, is the duly elected leader of Venezuela. Well, was he elected president? No. Prime minister? No. Well, he was elected to Congress, and there's a clause in the Constitution says that if some member of Congress decides, and with and his party does run that portion of Congress, decides, hey, you know what? The president didn't win the election legitimately, so I'm now president. That he gets to be president. I wonder if they would agree to that in America. If the Speaker of the House said, you know what? The president didn't really win more votes in our democracy. I'm now the president. Would they be like, oh no, that's totally fine. And you know what? It's actually Donald Trump doing the coup. Nancy Pelosi's the legitimate president, and let's move on. My guess is they would not agree to that. I mean, Donald Trump talks about how a legal case in the Justice Department is a coup against him. But when they grab guns in Venezuela, John Bolton says, all options are on the table, and we might do in other words, implying we might do a military invasion of Venezuela. They go, not a coup, not a coup. And all the media bows their head and goes, yes, sir, not a coup. Wait a minute, if Guaido, in your supposed explanation, is the legitimately elected president, again, that's nonsensical, of Venezuela, then isn't Maduro doing the coup? Because somebody's doing a coup. They got guns pointed at one another. So it's preposterous.
It's vigorous democracy. And so as you pointed out, Donald Trump has had coups on the mind recently, but it tends to be just of the investigating his finances type. And so he just tweeted, I am monitoring the situation in Venezuela very closely via Fox and Friends. The United States stands with the people of Venezuela and their freedom. Capitalized there. Yes, he's on it. He's watching.
Yeah, two things about that. First of all, they keep saying it over and over again. Because of course he's not, right? And when you're doing a coup, you would want the president who is supporting that coup of the most powerful country on earth to be paying attention. Hey, are we doing this right? How's it going? Should we react on the spot, etc.? And you know that he has 6 hours of what they call executive time every day, where he just eats burgers and watches Fox. So they're like, no, for the first time today, the president is actually at work. And this is a big deal. He, from time to time, between burgers and Fox and Friends, is actually paying attention. Like that's like a news event. Shouldn't the president be paying attention every day?
Yeah.
Besides which, I don't believe them that he's paying close attention. He doesn't pay close attention to anything. And this coup does not, if they branded the coup Trump, then he might pay attention. Like, whoa, okay? But basically what him and Pompeo are saying is not that Operación Libertad has begun. They're basically saying Operation ExxonMobil has begun. Because John Bolton literally said it on Fox News. He went on and said, yeah, we're gonna look out for the interests of American companies and specifically American oil companies in Venezuela. This coup is on behalf of ExxonMobil. It doesn't mean that Maduro is a good guy. I think Maduro is a bad guy in 100 different ways, and I know that every issue breaks into camps. You're either pro-Maduro or anti-Maduro. Sorry, at the Young Turks, we do not play that game. So Maduro is not a good guy. I don't believe it was a legitimate election. And if Guaido pursued his constitutional case in a way that was peaceful, there's some chance that I would be on his side. But when he coordinates it with America, and then our national security head goes on television, goes, we're doing it for the oil companies, and then they take guns into the streets and try to do a coup against the sitting president, then no deal. Then no deal. It doesn't mean Maduro's a good guy, but this is not the way to do it. They're starting a civil war. And then that brings me to another conclusion. Guys, think about it. You think that they're gonna do this right? Look at the two main guys in charge, Donald Trump and John Bolton. Donald Trump, a total incompetent. You think he planned the details? You think he was like, all right, guys, now what if it doesn't succeed? And in fact, let's talk about how it's going to succeed. If we want him to capture the palace in this case, how would we get there? Whose support do we need? Do we have the Chief Justice on our side? What percentage of the generals do we have on our side? What are the chances that Donald Trump asked any of those questions? 0%. Okay, so now let's say that our military or et cetera have some smart people. Well, you gotta go to the John Bolton, who's the head of national security, and he's the one most enthusiastic about this. He's the idiot who helped plan the Iraq war. How'd that go for us? It's just because John Bolton is not mentally unstable like Donald Trump doesn't mean he's smart. The people who planned the Iraq war thought that they would throw roses at our feet, that it would just take a couple of weeks. It was the worst foreign policy blunder of our lifetime. John Bolton still thinks it was a rising success. If Iraq is a success, wait till you get a load of Venezuela. And who's leading this charge? Bolton and Trump. So
with an assist from Lou Dobbs.
Yeah, and I would say the good news is that means it's not gonna work, but none of that is good news. Because look, the Maduro government is brutalizing the people. I mean, the situation is horrible there. There's got to be an approach that gets them to the negotiating table, but now they're not gonna come to the table. After you plan a coup, you think they're gonna come to the table? I mean, in a bad case scenario, Maduro wins and the pain of Venezuela continues with bloodshed on top. In another bad case scenario, Guaido wins and goes, great. All the oil contracts now go to the American oil companies and the robbery of Venezuela has begun. The worst case scenario is nobody wins, and we have a protracted civil war.
And possibly not even just civil war. We could be involved. It could be an international thing that draws in other countries in the region.
This kind of intervention is a disastrous idea, a terrible idea. Look, they'll say, well, John, you libs, this guy has human rights abuses, Maduro does. We have to act, really? We have 45 dictatorships with terrible human rights records that the United States has military bases in and actively supports. There's over 70 dictatorships in the country with terrible human rights abuses. We're not invading any of them. We're not encouraging coups against any of them. In fact, a lot of them we prop up and support and put our military bases in and go, bravo, way to crush your people. And they're not on CNN talking about the human rights abuses in those countries. They're just not doing it. Why Venezuela? And the only other country that we're thinking of having armed conflict with is Iran. Oh, look at that. 2 of the top oil producing countries in the world. Have you seen that at all on cable news? Other than John Bolton actually admitting it, have you seen any of the anchors going, could this be about the oil? No, wait, human rights. Human rights, they found out there's human rights problems in Venezuela.
And also, I would imagine, I don't watch a lot of mainstream like CNN or whatever, but they're gonna have a block of 6 hours of panels. There'll be an hour in the middle that's about Donald Trump standing up for liberty and freedom in Venezuela. And then flanking it will be 2 to 3 hours on each side of how he's demonizing asylum seekers, how he hates people from Latin and South America more than literally anyone else in the planet. Like, can you find another piece of evidence from 2 years of the Trump presidency that he has ever given a damn about anyone south of the border with Mexico? But suddenly, in this particular case, it's standing up for the people, standing up for democracy and freedom, human rights and all of that.
That's such a great point by John. So you're telling me that the anchors on cable news and a lot of the reporters in print journalism, who I respect more generally, with a straight face are reporting that Donald Trump really cares about the people of Venezuela, and that's why we're doing this? Really? And you call yourself a journalist. Is there any evidence to back that up? And I guarantee you, if we tell them the real reason and you go, hey, those are 2 of the top oil producing countries in the world. Behind the scenes, not on air and not in print, they would say, of course. Do they ever write it? Do they ever say it? No, that would be a conspiracy theory. No, the conspiracy theory is that Donald Trump would ever care about a Latin American.
Yeah.
He has shown no evidence that he has ever done that. And now all of a sudden he's like, the pain of the people of Venezuela. Hey, are we gonna allow them in? There's like millions of people that left Venezuela because of how disastrous it is. So are we gonna allow all of them in as refugees? Because I hear Donald Trump cares a lot about the people of Venezuela. Oh, we're not going to let them in.
Yeah.
So maybe, just maybe, he's lying for the 10,000th time. And in this case, that is literal. On the go? Don't worry, we got you covered. You can still listen to TYT at our new podcast network. Find us on Apple Podcasts, the Google Play Store, or at tyt.com/podcast.